The road stretched endlessly before Emma Clark, a silver ribbon twisting through hills dusted with the soft green of early summer. The hum of her car engine filled the silence, but even the gentle rhythm couldn't quiet the ache that had been following her. For months, it wasn't sadness, exactly, more like a hollow place she couldn't name. Emma was 32, a teacher in a small town outside Portland. Her life looked steady from the outside. A tidy apartment, kind coworkers, a calendar full of routine. But inside, she often felt like she was moving through fog, searching for something just out of reach. Her days blurred together, the quiet mornings with coffee, the laughter of students in hallways, the lonely dinners eaten beside the glow of her laptop. She told herself she was fine, that this was what adulthood felt like. But lately, the stillness in her heart had become heavier then. One Thursday evening, her mother called. "Emma, how about a weekend trip?" Linda's voice carried that familiar warmth, the kind that wrapped around Emma like a blanket. "A trip? Since when do you take spontaneous breaks?" Emma teased, smiling for the first time in days. Linda chuckled. "Maybe I'm getting old and sentimental. I just thought it would be nice. You and me, like we used to." Emma hesitated. The idea felt both comforting and strange. They hadn't gone anywhere together in years, not since her father passed away 6 summers ago. That loss had changed the rhythm of their family. Her mother had grown quieter, more private, while Emma had buried herself in work to keep the ache at bay. But there was something in her mother's voice that, Nita, softness mixed with something else. A hint of urgency, maybe? Or longing. "Where would we go?" Emma asked the coast. "Just a few hours away. We could watch the sunset again." That word gained code in her mind. The last time they'd watched the sunset together had been the evening before her father's final hospital visit. She remembered how he'd squeezed her hand, smiling weakly as the sky burned orange and pink. Since then, she hadn't gone back to that beach. It felt like a place frozen in memory. Still, she heard herself say, "Okay, Mom, let's do it." The following Saturday, Emma stood by her car, suitcase in hand, watching her mother step out of the house. Linda looked different than Emma remembered. Smaller somehow, though her smile hadn't faded. Her hair, once a deep chestnut, now shimmered with soft silver streaks that caught the morning light. "You packed enough for a month," Linda joked, eyeing Emma's large bag. Emma laughed. "You never know what kind of weather we'll get near the coast." They shared that familiar, easy smile that had grown rare in recent years. As they pulled out of the driveway, the air felt new. The radio played softly old songs Emma's father used to hum along to. The melodies made her chest tighten, but she said nothing. Linda tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, lost in her own thoughts for the first hour. They talked about simple things. Emma's students, the neighbor's dog, the overgrown garden Linda swore she'd trim next weekend. But as the highway curved closer to the sea, the air between them grew quieter. Emma watched her mother's face, noticing how her eyes drifted often toward the horizon. There was something reflective there, like she was holding back words she wasn't ready to release. Finally, Linda broke the silence. "Do you ever think about him?" Emma didn't need to ask who she meant. "All the time," she said softly. Linda nodded, her lips tightening. "Me too." They didn't speak again for a while. The road wound through tall trees and sunlight flickered through the branches like memories too bright to hold Dot by the time they reached the coast. The sky had turned pale gold. Waves rolled lazily against the rocks, and the scent of salt filled the air. They checked into a small inn that looked out over the ocean, a place Emma barely remembered from her childhood. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. The sound of the sea carried through the windows. Linda dropped her bag on the bed and smiled. "I haven't been here in over 20 years. It looks just the same." Emma gazed around, feeling the gentle tug of nostalgia. "I think I remember this place. Dad used to buy those caramel candies from the little shop near the pier." "Yes," Linda said quietly. "He loved that shop." Something unspoken lingered in her tone. Emma noticed the faraway look in her mother's eyes, the same look she had whenever old memories surfaced. "Mom," Emma said gently, Is everything okay?" Linda turned toward her with a faint smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just wanted us to be here together again." Emma nodded, but she sensed there was more behind those words. That night, they walked along the beach, the moonlight glimmering on the water. The waves whispered secrets as they reached the shore, and for the first time in years, Emma felt close to her mother, not as a daughter following her parent, but as two women walking side by side carrying the same quiet ache. When they returned to the inn, Linda stood by the window for a long time before speaking. "Emma," she said softly, "there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." Emma turned, her heart suddenly pounding. "What is it?" Linda hesitated, her eyes glistening with something deep, something that felt like both sorrow and peace. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Let's talk tomorrow." "Tonight, let's just rest." Emma nodded. Though curiosity burned inside her, she didn't know it yet. But the secret her mother carried would change how she saw her family, her past, and love itself forever. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains, painting the walls of the seaside inn with a golden glow. Emma woke to the sound of waves brushing against the rocks below. For a moment, she lay still, letting the rhythm of the ocean settle her thoughts. Her mother was already awake, sitting by the window with a steaming cup of tea. The sight made Emma smile. It was such a mom thing. Linda always rose early, no matter where they were, as if dawn itself whispered secrets she didn't want to miss. "Morning," Emma said, her voice still wrapped in sleep. Linda turned, smiling. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you rest well?" Emma nodded, though she hadn't slept deeply. Her mind had been full of questions since last night, the quiet tone in her mother's voice, the promise of a story for tomorrow. But now, looking at Linda framed by sunlight, Emma felt something else: gratitude. Gratitude that they were here, that after years of distance built by silence and time, they were finally sharing space again. "Want to take a walk?" Linda asked, setting down her cup. "The tide's low. You used to love collecting shells." Emma laughed softly. "I still do." The beach stretched endlessly before them, damp and shining under the rising sun. Emma slipped off her shoes, feeling the cool sand between her toes. And for a moment she was 10 years old again, running beside her mother, chasing waves, laughing as the cold surf splashed against their ankles. As they walked now, she felt that memory return like a song she'd almost forgotten. "Do you remember the summer we camped near the lighthouse?" Emma asked. Linda chuckled. "How could I forget? You insisted on sleeping in your own tent. Then you came running into mine in the middle of the night because of a raccoon." "Sounded like a bear," Emma protested, laughing. Linda smiled, her eyes crinkling. "You've always been brave, Emma, even when you were scared." Something about that sentence lingered. It wasn't just about childhood. It felt like something her mother truly meant. Emma glanced toward her. "Brave? I don't feel that way lately. I've been coasting, I guess. Just existing." Linda slowed her steps. "You've been carrying too much alone, haven't you?" Emma shrugged, unsure how to answer. "After Dad died, I guess I never figured out how to move forward. You seemed so strong. I didn't want to add to your pain." Linda stopped walking and turned to face her daughter. Her voice was gentle. "I wasn't strong, Emma. I was surviving. There's a difference." The wind caught her hair as she spoke, and for the first time, Emma saw the quiet truth in her mother's expression, the exhaustion behind the smile, the years of holding herself together for everyone else. They stood there for a while, the sea whispering between them. No more words were needed just then. The silence was its own kind of closeness. Later, back at the inn, they shared breakfast by the window overlooking the waves. The sunlight shimmered on the water, and Linda's mood seemed lighter. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo, its edges soft from time. "I brought something to show you," she said. Emma took the photo. It was of her parents, young and laughing, sitting on this very beach. Her father's arm was around Linda, and their eyes sparkled with that easy joy people have before life teaches them loss. "I remember this day," Linda said softly. "Your father had just told me a joke so bad I nearly cried from laughing. We didn't have much money, but we had this place. It was ours. Emma traced her fingers over the image. You look so happy. We were, Linda said. Then, after a pause, she added, he was my second chance at love. Emma looked up, surprised by the tenderness in her mother's voice. Second chance. Linda smiled faintly, but didn't elaborate. Yes, some loves find you once. Others return when you least expect them. Your father was the kind of man who could see the good in broken things. Something in her tone hinted at old pain, but Emma didn't press. Instead, she said quietly, I miss him every day. Me too, Linda whispered. That afternoon, they walked along the pier where the little candy shop still stood. The wooden sign had faded, but the scent of caramel drifted through the air just as Emma remembered. They each bought a small bag, and as they sat on, the next morning arrived with a restless wind sweeping in from the ocean. The sky was gray, the air sharp with the scent of rain. Emma and Linda had planned to visit the lighthouse that afternoon, but as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, they decided to stay near town instead. They wandered through narrow streets lined with little shops, their windows fogged with the warmth of morning coffee and sea breeze. A light drizzle began to fall, speckling the sidewalks. And Emma laughed as she lifted her scarf to cover her hair. Guess we picked the wrong weekend for sunshine, she said. Linda smiled, her eyes soft. Maybe the weather has its reasons. Some memories only show up in the rain. So what's such a peculiar thing to say that Emma stopped for a moment, watching her mother's face. Linda had that faraway expression, again the one that hinted at another time, another life. Before Emma could ask what she meant, her mother had already stepped inside a small bookstore tucked between two cafes. The little bell above the door chimed as Emma followed her in. The store smelled like paper and sea, air and old. Familiar scent that wrapped around her like a forgotten song. Rows of well-loved books lined the walls, and in one corner sat a wooden piano. Its keys yellowed by time, Linda walked straight to it, brushing her fingers gently across the surface. You used to play, Emma said softly. I did, Linda replied, her voice carrying a tenderness that caught Emma off guard. Not well, but enough to make your father laugh. Emma smiled. He always said you could make a song out of anything. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows, and the sound felt almost rhythmic, as if the world itself was listening. Then, without warning, Linda pressed one of the piano keys. The note trembled through the quiet, air soft, fragile, but alive. She played another, then another, until a slow melody began to form, broken, hesitant, yet strangely familiar. Emma froze. She knew that tune. It was a lullaby her father used to hum when she couldn't sleep. Her throat tightened. Mom, that song Dad used to? Linda nodded. He learned it from me. Ma blinked. You wrote it? Linda didn't answer right away. Her fingers lingered over the keys, trembling slightly. Someone wrote it for me once, she whispered. Long before I met your father. The words hung in the air like smoke, soft but impossible to ignore. Emma's heart began to race. Someone, she asked carefully. Linda exhaled slowly. Yes, a long time ago when I was about your age. It was a different kind of love, young, uncertain. He wrote that song for me the day he left. Mine spun. And Dad knew. Linda nodded again, her eyes glistening. He knew everything. He found me years later when I was still trying to forget. He never once asked me to explain. He just stayed. For a moment, the sound of the rain deepened, blurring everything beyond the window. They sat together on the old piano bench, the silence between them now thick with memories and revelation. Emma wanted to ask more too, know the story of the man who had once written a song for her mother, but something in Linda's posture stopped her instead. She reached out and rested her hand over her mother's mom. She said gently, You don't have to tell me everything right now. I just want you to know I'm here. Linda looked up, eyes bright with emotion. You remind me of him sometimes, she said quietly. The way you look at the world with too much heart. Emma gave a soft, sad smile. Maybe that's from you." Linda laughed lightly, the sound trembling like the rain against glass. Later that day, as the storm eased, they returned to the inn. The clouds began to thin, revealing streaks of pale blue sky. The ocean still roared, but its sound now felt calmer, steadier. Emma sat by the window, watching the light stretch across the waves. Her thoughts kept circling back to that piano, that song, and the man her mother had loved before her father. A strange mix of emotions filled her: curiosity, sympathy, even awe. She realized that she had never really seen her mother as a woman who'd lived a life before motherhood, before grief. Linda had carried her stories quietly, like folded letters tucked deep in a drawer, but now those stories were beginning to surface, one by one. When Linda joined her by the window, holding 2 mugs of cocoa, Emma asked softly, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Her mother considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I think about all that came after the laughter. Your father, you. Life doesn't give us perfect choices, Emma, just chances. And the courage to take them." Emma looked at her, feeling something shift quietly inside. "You really loved him, didn't you? Both of them, in your own ways." Linda nodded. "Yes, and I think love can take more than one shape in a lifetime. Sometimes it arrives too early, sometimes too late. But it always teaches us something true." That evening, as twilight settled over the ocean, the inn's old radio crackled softly from the lobby. A song began to play, a slow piano melody carried by the faint sound of strings. Emma froze. It was that tune, the same one her mother had played in the bookstore. She turned toward Linda, who had gone still, her eyes glistening as she listened. "Mom," Emma whispered, "it's the same song." Linda nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "It's been years since I've heard it. He must have recorded it after all." Emma frowned gently. "What do you mean?" Linda's voice trembled. "The man who wrote it, he became a composer. I never thought his music would find me again." The waves crashed softly against the shore, as if echoing the rhythm of their hearts. Emma reached for her mother's hand, holding it tightly. In that single moment between the rain, the memory, and the music, they both understood something unspoken. The past wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting, patient and silent, for the right moment to return, and now it had. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the world washed clean. The inn's garden sparkled under a soft mist, every blade of grass tipped with dew. Emma stood by the window, watching sunlight fight its way through a patch of drifting clouds. It felt like a new day, yet something about it still carried the echo of last night's song. She could still hear it in her mind, that gentle piano tune her mother had played, the one the radio had echoed later. It had become more than a melody now. It was a thread connecting past and present, weaving through all the years between. When Linda entered the room, Emma turned, sensing the weight her mother carried in her eyes. She looked thoughtful, almost fragile, as if one wrong word might make the years fall apart around her. "Couldn't sleep again?" Emma asked softly. Linda shook her head with a faint smile. "I tried, but dreams have their own plans." Emma motioned toward the chair near the window. "Sit with me. Maybe we can talk about it." For a moment, Linda hesitated. Then she nodded, sitting beside her daughter. The ocean stretched out before them, calm and endless. For a while, they said nothing. The silence wasn't awkward, it was careful, like two people trying to walk across ice without breaking it. Finally, Linda spoke. "Do you ever feel like your life divides itself into chapters? Some you can read over and over, and some you keep closed?" Emma nodded. "I think everyone has those." Linda looked down at her hands. "The man who wrote that song, his name was Daniel. We met when I was about your age." The name lingered in the air like a whisper. "He wasn't perfect," she continued, her voice distant. "He was restless, always chasing something he couldn't name. But he had this way of seeing the world. Everything was beauty and possibility to him. He used to say that music was his way of keeping feelings safe, because words, he believed, always failed." Emma listened quietly. And you loved him. Linda smiled faintly, the kind that hurts as much as it comforts. Yes, but sometimes love doesn't arrive when you're ready for it. And when it does, you're never sure if it's meant to stay. The light shifted as the clouds moved, and Emma saw tears glimmering in her mother's eyes. What happened? She asked softly. Linda drew a slow breath. He had an offer, a chance to study abroad. I told him to take it, even though I wanted him to stay. I thought if I loved him enough, letting him go would be the right thing. But I didn't realize. Sometimes letting go doesn't mean the heart understands. Her voice trembled. He left, and I waited. Letters came for a while, and then one day, they stopped. I told myself he'd moved on. So I did too. Then, years later, I met your father. He was steady, kind, the kind of man who didn't need grand words to show he cared. When he asked about my past, I told him the truth. And he still chose me. Emma reached out, covering her mother's hand with her own. He must have loved you deeply. He did, Linda said softly. And I loved him back with everything I had left to give. She paused, glancing toward the sea. But I never forgot the song. Not because I still love Daniel the same way, but because it reminded me of the part of myself that once believed love could heal everything. The air in the room felt still, charged with something tender and sad. Emma could feel her own throat tightening. I think I understand, she said quietly. It's not about choosing one person over another. It's about carrying the pieces of every love that shaped who we are. Linda looked at her daughter, surprised by the clarity in her voice. Yes, she whispered. That's exactly it. They sat together, the waves outside moving in slow rhythm. The sea breathing for both of them. Emma thought of her own heart. The years she'd spent hiding behind her work. Too afraid to trust, too afraid to lose. Her mother's story wasn't just about the past. It was a mirror, you know? The following morning dawned pale and quiet, the sky streaked with soft hues of lavender and gold. Emma awoke to the gentle sound of waves brushing against the shore and the distant cries of gulls. For the first time in years, the world felt unusually still, as if it were holding its breath. Waiting for something important to unfold, she dressed quickly and went out onto the inn's balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, calm yet immense, reflecting the sky's gentle colors. Emma felt an odd mixture of anticipation and fear. A flutter in her chest she couldn't place. Her mother soon joined her, carrying 2 mugs of steaming tea. She set one down and stood beside Emma, gazing at the horizon. Beautiful, isn't it? Linda whispered. Emma nodded. It feels like anything could happen today. Linda glanced at her daughter, a wistful expression crossing her face. Sometimes you have to let things happen, Emma, even the things you've been afraid to face. They walked along the beach, leaving footprints in the damp sand, waves lapping at their feet. The world felt suspended in a fragile, quiet, broken only by the rhythm of the sea. For hours, they shared memories of childhood stories of scraped knees. Summer ice cream, late-night laughter, and each tale revealed more of the depth and bond between them. And yet, beneath their laughter, there was a tension neither dared to name. A secret still hovered in the air, unspoken, waiting to be acknowledged. Finally, as the tide retreated, leaving small pools glimmering like glass, Linda stopped. She looked at Emma with a gaze so earnest it made her heart clench. "Emma," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've kept inside for far too long." Emma felt her chest tighten. She had sensed there was more, but hearing it said aloud made the world feel fragile. "Mom, whatever it is, you can tell me." Linda took a deep breath, letting the ocean breeze brush her face. "You've always seen the pieces of me that no one else does. But there's one story I've never shared fully about love. Choices and mistakes I had to live with." Emma waited silently, her eyes never leaving her mother's. Linda's voice trembled slightly, but her words were steady. "Before I met your father, I was in love with someone else. Daniel, the man who wrote that song you heard yesterday." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She already knew a fragment of the story, but now it was real, tangible. He was everything I thought love should be, and I loved him truly. But life had its own plans. He left, and I thought I'd never see him again. Your father came into my life later steady, kind, patient. But I always carried a part of Daniel with me, quietly, like a book tucked away on a shelf. Emma's breath caught. She wanted to ask questions, to understand every detail, but she remained still. She could feel her mother's emotions laid bare before her. Raw and unguarded. I never spoke of him because I didn't want to diminish the love I had with your father. But now, I realize it's not about diminishing. It's about understanding. Every choice, every love, every loss shapes who we are. And I want you to know that before it's too late to say anything at all. Tears shimmered in Emma's eyes. She had never seen her mother like this, so open, so vulnerable. She reached for her mother's hand, gripping it gently. Mom, I think I understand. I think I've been afraid of my own feelings too. I've been holding back because I was scared of making mistakes, of getting hurt. Linda turned to her, eyes glistening, and smiled faintly. And yet here you are, standing on this beach, brave enough to face them anyway. The wind caught the loose strands of Emma's hair, and for a moment, everything else vanished. The sea, the sand, the sky, it all felt suspended in a single heartbeat. You know, Linda continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Love isn't about being fearless. It's about being willing to take a step forward even when your heart trembles. Emma felt the words sink in, carrying the weight of all she had been avoiding for so long. I think I'm ready, she said softly, not entirely sure what she meant, but knowing she meant it fully. Linda squeezed her hand. Good, because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that lead to the most beautiful beginnings. For a long while, they walked in silence, the only sound the gentle rhythm of the waves. Emma felt a shift inside her, a quiet, profound change. The story of her mother's past no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it was a bridge, connecting the two of them in ways that went beyond memory or loss. Her mother finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and Emma felt the depth of emotion, their love, pride, hope, and the unspoken acknowledgement of shared pain. Thank you, Mom, Emma said quietly, for trusting me with your truth, for letting me see who you really are. Linda smiled through tears, her voice soft but firm. And thank you, Emma, for being brave enough to listen. That is what makes life meaningful. The courage to love, to forgive, to embrace the story of our hearts. As the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma realized that nothing between them would ever be the same. The unspoken had finally been spoken. The secret had been shared. And in that moment, the bond between mother and daughter, tested by time, silence, and memory, had deepened into something unshakably loved that was honest, enduring, and beautiful. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt the weight inside her chest lift. She understood truly what her mother had meant. Love, in all its forms, was worth the risk, worth the waiting, worth the quiet courage it demanded. And for the first time in years, she believed that their hearts, both heavy and hopeful, could move forward together, stronger than ever before. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Emma and her mother, Linda, stood on the balcony of the inn, watching the waves shimmer under the first light of day. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, calm yet alive, as if holding a promise of new beginnings. The air felt different, now lighter, warmer, carrying a sense of quiet relief. The weight that had been hovering over them for years, the secrets and unspoken truths, had finally been released. The bond between them no longer bore the tension of unshared stories. It radiated a deeper understanding, a closeness forged in honesty and trust. Emma sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the moment. I can't remember the last time I felt this. Free, she said softly. Linda smiled, eyes following the movement of a distant gull gliding over the water. Freedom isn't about running from the past, she said. It's about carrying it with you without letting it weigh you down. Every memory, every love, every loss, they are all part of who we are. And sharing them makes them lighter. Emma nodded. She thought of Daniel, the man her mother had loved before her father. And of her father himself, the steady, patient love he had given that shaped their family. She thought of herself, of the years she had spent holding her heart back. And she felt a quiet resolve grow within her. They spent the morning walking along the beach. The sand cool beneath their feet, the waves curling gently around their ankles. They collected shells and driftwood, laughing quietly at the shapes they imagined in the pieces of nature they picked up. Emma noticed that every small detail, the pattern of the sand, the sparkle of the water, the warmth of her mother's hand felt sharper, richer, more vivid, Mom, Emma said after a while. I think I finally understand what you meant yesterday. About love, about courage, about living fully. I've been so cautious, always thinking I had to protect myself. But now I see that life isn't meant to be lived half-heartedly. Linda squeezed her hand. Exactly. And you're never too young or too old to start embracing it. Love, friendship, adventure. Even the quiet moments alone, they all matter. They shape you in ways you don't realize until you let them in. Emma smiled, feeling warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that part of the reason she had been hesitant all these years was fear not of failing, but of feeling too deeply, of being vulnerable. And now, standing here with her mother, she understood that vulnerability was not weakness. It was courage. Later that afternoon, they returned to the inn, where the staff greeted them with the familiar warmth of small-town hospitality. They lingered over lunch in the sunlit dining room, talking about everything and nothing, the rhythm of their conversation comfortable and easy, punctuated by laughter that felt like music. Linda reached across the table and took Emma's hand. I want you to know something, she said, her voice gentle but firm. All the stories I've shared with you, the joys, the heartbreaks, the loves I had and lost, they're part of my life. But you, Emma, are the most important story I'll ever be a part of. And I want you to carry your heart forward without fear, knowing you are never alone. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, of relief, and of hope. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. I promise I will. And I'll remember this lesson for the rest of my life. Linda smiled, her eyes glistening. That's all I could ever hope for. The day slipped slowly into evening, the sun lowering itself into the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Emma and her mother returned to the balcony, wrapped in soft shawls against the evening breeze. They sat in companionable silence, watching the waves shimmer under the fading light. Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder, feeling this steady warmth of her presence. You know, she said softly, I think this trip has changed everything. I feel like I can finally move forward without carrying the weight.